All right, let's shift our focus now to Bangladesh. Remember, just 2 months before elections in Bangladesh, the country is on edge once again. A youth leader's assassination has triggered widespread unrest in the country. Sharif Osman Hadi, the student leader involved in the 2024 uprising that ousted Sheikh Hasina, was shot last week. He was receiving medical treatment in Singapore before succumbing to his injuries on Thursday night. As of this morning, calm returned to several parts of the country. However, protesters continued to march in central Dhaka's Shahbag, carrying flags and demanding justice for the slain leader.
We are here to demand justice for Hadi. We demand that Hadi's killers be brought to justice and given the maximum punishment.
Now, shortly after Hadi's death, the situation in Bangladesh's capital spiraled. Protesters vandalized the partially demolished house of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. They were seen attempting to tear down the remaining portion of the house and setting fire to a poster of the ousted Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina. This following a night of unrest. Several buildings in the capital, including those housing the country's 2 leading newspapers, were set on fire. The first attack came on Pratham Alo, where the crowd had gone chanting slogans. The crowd vandalized the office before setting it on fire around midnight. They then vandalized the ground and first floors of the Daily Star, another leading newspaper, before putting it ablaze at about 12:30 a.m. The blaze quickly engulfed the 2 floors, sending a huge column of smoke into the air. The fire service could not reach the building for some time because a crowd blocked their way. The entire night shift fled to the roof to save their lives, pleading for help through phone calls and social media posts. Firefighters eventually reached the site and brought the fire under control at about 2 a.m. However, the journalists could not be brought out immediately because the crowd stormed the building after the fire was extinguished. The interim government, meanwhile, in a statement, urged citizens to resist all forms of mob violence committed by who he referred to as fringe elements. The government strongly condemned all acts of violence, intimidation, arson and destruction of properties, pointing out that it is a critical moment in the country's history with elections planned. The interim administration under Mohammad Yunus, in a message to the citizens, said, "We cannot and must not allow it to be derailed by those," it said, "thrive on chaos and reject peace." But with the past week of unrest, demonstrations and violence in Bangladesh, they've raised some very serious questions on the interim administration in power. Is control slipping out of Yunus's hands? Or is there more to this chaos than meets the eye? All right, to understand what is happening in Bangladesh this close to elections, we spoke with former and current leaders of the country, Mohibul Hasan, former education minister during Hasina's regime, and a prominent student leader, Saddam Hussein. In fact, both have connected the persisting chaos to Pakistan's interference. Take a listen.
Not just orchestrated, but the legal regime there are being assisted by officials of Pakistan intelligence. It is public record. It's not something I'm making up. Generals from Pakistan Army had been visiting Bangladesh in the last 15 months, almost every month. We've seen Lashkar-e-Taiba LET's head claiming that they have sent their operatives to Bangladesh to train the Mujahideen, in their words. And Maulana Fazlur Rahman has been given a state protocol when he went to Bangladesh.
Overthrowing of a constitutional and democratic government. The agitation and brutal violence protest was actually done by the Jamaat Islam, Hizbut Tahrir, and other Islamic military political parties, legal or illegal. And after 5 August, the government is actually run by these groups. They are doing whatever they want. They are trying to have Sharia law. They are attacking women's freedom. They are attacking to the minorities. So, not only the evil nexus between Jamaat Islam and the current illegal regime, there is also connection with the Pakistan-backed terrorist organizations, ISI-backed terrorist organizations. They are moving freely in Bangladesh. They are training the Islamic militant groups. So, what is happening right now, Bangladesh, is actually a meticulous plan of the current government.
All right, you heard the Bangladeshi perspective. Let's get you an Indian perspective as well. Let me go across to Ambassador Anil Trigunayath, former Indian diplomat and distinguished fellow WIF. Remember, he has served in the Indian missions in Bangladesh, Mongolia, US, Russia, among other countries. He joins us on the broadcast tonight. Ambassador Trigunayath, welcome to the show. Can I first understand from you what you make of this situation? These are anti-India slogans that are being carried out in Bangladesh. These are very concerning times, not just because the India-Bangladesh ties are impacted, but the country itself is preparing for elections in February next year.
Well, unfortunately, what is happening in Bangladesh is extremely concerning for India and should be concerning for the rest of the world. Because this is something that is nearer to the democratic transition process that is expected to take place. That is also in certain ways very flawed because several political parties, including the Awami League, have not been allowed to participate in the election. So in that lies the seeds of discontent. And that's what you will be seeing going forward. The smooth transition would be very, very difficult in that sense. At the same time, what we are looking at today, if you remember, this Osman Hadi was against all established political parties. He wanted a new kind of system, a new kind of political party, because he had no faith in any of them. So anybody could have been involved in his killing. But at the same time, they somehow, as a convenient excuse and distraction, and possibly under the guidance of the ISI and others, the Bangladesh government of the day, transitional government, has started, pointing fingers at India, and that has fanned more trouble. That's against India, and that's why we are looking at the attacks on the Indian High Commission and the threat perceptions on the assets that India has there. Now, that is something absolutely uncalled for and unjustified. India is the only country that has continued to help Bangladeshis, not a government. We work with the government of the day, whichever is there, but India has only helped the Bangladeshi people in their journey towards development, all through its neighborhood first policy. But somehow India is being made out to be a punching bag, and whoever wishes comes up. And we have seen that there are these radical elements, whether it's from Jamaat Islami or other elements that some of your previous speakers talked about, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Pakistani ISI, and other radical and extremist groups that are operating currently in a free hand in Bangladesh. And for them, stopping them, let alone stopping them, they have been actually very fervently welcomed by the current regime. So that casts aspersions on their conduct and their intentions.
Ambassador Trigunayath, very rightly said. And what's interesting is that when I spoke with Saddam Hussein, the student leader, he said that most Bangladeshis are not against India. It is these radical Islamist groups who are making this a political narrative and pushing the anti-India sentiment on the streets. But as far as most Bangladeshis are concerned, what do you think? What would they want in terms of their elected members? Because obviously we know Muhammad Yunus is somebody who was not elected democratically through elections. And I also want you to talk to us briefly about the American role, because Yunus is somebody who thanked Bill Clinton and Joe Biden earlier when he took power of bringing in this regime change in Bangladesh.
Well, there are definitely indications that the Americans were not happy with Sheikh Hasina. for various reasons, including the base that they wanted there. Plus, she was trying to be friendly with both India and China and balancing it rather well. And she was becoming independent. And as you know, for the big powers, independent foreign policy is not something that they like. So they naturally work towards that. Besides, Bangladesh has its own major problems. There is a youth discontent which is there. Sheikh Hasina herself had become somewhat autocratic in the sense and was unable to connect with the masses. So this was just they needed simply a trigger. And the Americans are great at that. They would have worked on it. And there are indications that nobody can say that today, but this is how one comes to know their own government. The US, many of the leaders have said that at least 60 regime changes have been brought about by their agencies. So that is very much there. But India and Bangladesh have been very close. People in Bangladesh do understand that the one country that has stood with them from their independence up to till today is India, and that selflessly has done. Our only expectation from Bangladesh and all our neighbor countries has been that they would not allow their land or their territory to be used against India's security concerns. Precisely, that's what Mr. Yunus's government has done. In fact, it has not been able to deliver since the 1 year almost since the time that this revolution, so-called revolution, took place. Well, that is for the people of Bangladesh to decide what kind of a government they want, what kind of people they want. But at the same time, just to distract them because they have not been able to deliver in any which way, they obviously try to find India into a punching bag. India wants, and what Prime Minister Modi, what Indian government has said is that we want elections to be there. We want well for Bangladesh. And till today, despite all the problems, India has continued to assist Bangladeshis,
Right.
despite the kind of statements coming from there.
So despite being a good friend with Bangladesh, clearly these are challenging times in the India-Bangladesh ties. We'll leave it there. Ambassador Anil Trigunaya, thank you very much for joining us on WION and sharing your perspective. Of course, viewers, we will keep getting you more from Bangladesh right now.